Okay, I'm going to be talking today about the movie Conspiracy, the Trial of the Chicago 8. Now, this is actually a movie that I have rewatched. When I first started this YouTube channel, it was only for books and movies that I was viewing or reading for the first time to get my initial reactions on that. But from this year, I've decided to expand that to any movies that I've rewatched. Because, every time you rewatch something, you have some new thoughts on it, or maybe this was a book or a movie that I haven't previously given my thoughts on, and I thought it would just be interesting to turn the camera on and see what kind of thoughts I have on that. Some brief background about this first. This is about the trial of the Chicago 8, as the title indicates. If you don't know what that is, well, probably your best bet is to just Google it or go to Wikipedia, but I'll try and give a brief summary here. There were protests at the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago, anti-war protests, that turned into violence. There's some debate to this day about whether the violence was on the part of the protesters or on the part of the police. But at any rate, there was a lot of violence, and the result was that there was a conspiracy trial with initially 8 of the protest leaders who were charged with conspiracy to create a riot. They are alternatively known as the Chicago 8 or the Chicago 7 or the Chicago 10. Reason being, there were originally 8 defendants, but then Bobby Seale, the leader of the Black Panthers, was taken out of the group and tried separately, and then it was the Chicago 7. Some people feel that if you refer to it as the Chicago 7, you're minimizing Bobby Seale's role, so they prefer the name of the Chicago 8. Occasionally, there was a movie that came out a few years ago called the Chicago 10. A reason for the Chicago 10 is that the 2 lawyers representing the Chicago 8 also ended up getting charged with contempt of court along with their clients, so that ended up making it into Chicago 10. Anyways, this movie is about the Chicago 8, and it's about their trial. This is a 1987 made-for-TV HBO movie. I did not see it in 1987. We didn't have HBO in the house I grew up with, and in 1987 I was too young to appreciate it or care about political movements anyways. I saw this movie in 2000, at which time I was a college student, and I was very interested in the history of radical political movements, and I was very interested in the Chicago 8, and I knew who they were, and I had read up on them to some degree. I didn't know this movie existed until I was living with a group of guys, and we had HBO at the time. That was the first time in my life I was living in a place that had HBO, because one of my roommates felt strongly that he wanted to get the cable package. I actually argued against it at the time. I said, we don't need cable, we'll end up wasting all our time watching TV. But then I was the one who ended up getting sucked into this. Well, I was flipping channels and I came across it, and the first time I saw it, I actually tuned into it halfway through. When I realized what it was, a dramatization of the Chicago 8 trial, I was like, oh, right, I'm interested in this. And I only saw half of it the first time, but then I went to the TV listings, and HBO at the time would kind of play things in cycles. Like, I think they still do, right? If there's a movie on rotation, it gets played several times that month. And so I saw that the next time this was coming on TV, it was like at 6 o'clock in the morning, sometime the following week. But I thought, right, I am definitely going to watch this. So set my alarm for 6 o'clock in the morning, which was not the time I usually woke up as a college student, but really wanted to watch it. I was working on a college newspaper with some guys who had similar interests to me, who were also interested in the history of protest movements in the Chicago 8. And I remember saying to them one day in the college newspaper office, so, their HBO is going to be showing this movie, a dramatization of the Chicago 8 trial. You guys should come over and watch it with me. We'll make popcorn. It'll be fun. And they said no. Very flatly said no. I think they were interested in it, but not interested in it to the extent that they wanted to wake up early to see the movie. And this is one of those things that sticks out in my memory even all these 20 years later, because it was a classic awkward moment where they just flatly said no, and there was this awkward silence, and somebody else in the college newspaper office said, "You just shot down his idea," like calling attention to the awkwardness of it. And then there was a little bit of a laugh, etc. Anyways, I did wake up the next week and I watched this, and I've subsequently seen it a few times since, because since the invention of YouTube, this has been put on YouTube I think there's a few different copies floating around YouTube, and I will link to a copy of it down below in the description for anyone who's interested and wants to check it out themselves. Yes, so talking maybe about the movie in general now, this is, the production quality is not great, meaning I think nowadays HBO movies, or kind of made-for-TV movies, have a lot higher reputation than they did in the 80s. This, you can see the production value of this is so small. It's shot entirely inside the courtroom, or a stage which is manufactured to look like a courtroom. The film quality does not seem to be great, and it looks like it's somewhat of a cheap set. There are some big name actors who are in it. Who I should have written this down before I started the review. I don't actually remember all of them offhand. Peter Boyle, I think, plays David Dillinger. Elliot Gould plays Weinstein. Winegrass. Winegrass, one of the defense lawyers, and a young Billy Zane, actually, according to IMDb, is actually in here as one of the police officers, and a couple other. And the guy who plays William Kunstler is famous, and I don't remember his name right now. Apologies, I should have come into this review better prepared, but this is one of my rambling reviews. Anyways, point being, there's a few famous people in it. Yeah, the production values are not great, and I'm sorry to say that the copies on YouTube are not great copies. It looks like somebody's old VHS tape that they uploaded onto YouTube, and the copy on YouTube is even grain. I mean, it was never great quality film to begin with, but the copy on YouTube is even grainier yet. But the quality of the production is not the point for a movie like this. And even watching the copy on YouTube, which I've rewatched just now, initially the kind of graininess of the footage jawed me a little bit, but once you get into it, once you start getting absorbed in the drama, you soon stop noticing it and you don't even care. So the production values are not great, but what is really interesting about this film, and why I would recommend it to anyone interested, is that it is based off of the actual transcripts of the trial. So that you see everything that you see being acted out on screen is, I believe in most cases, verbatim from the transcript records. So it's a perfect way to get yourself educated about the trial. Now, the reason I've rewatched it a couple times over the years. I think the last time I rewatched it was about 4 years ago now. The reason I rewatched it this week was because about all the buzz about the new Aaron Sorkin movie, The Trial of the Chicago 7. Now, the Aaron Sorkin movie, I'll talk about in a separate video. I don't want to muddle my reviews too much. I want to have this video be about this movie and another video be about Aaron Sorkin's movie. But Aaron Sorkin's movie is like the complete opposite of this one, whereas this is very kind of clunky production values based entirely off of the transcript. Aaron Sorkin's movie is much more polished, and Aaron Sorkin plays very fast and loose with the transcript. But all the buzz about the new Aaron Sorkin movie made me remember this movie and made me curious to check it out again. Even though I have aged considerably in the time since I originally saw this movie in 2000. Meaning when I first saw this movie as a college student, I think, you know, when you're a college student, that's maybe the appropriate age to be interested in these kind of radical protest leaders. And now when I'm much older and look at myself in the mirror and see all the gray hairs and lines under the eyes, I'm reminded that I'm at a much more respectable age than I was when I was initially interested in this. But I think this is true for a lot of people. Even as we kind of grow into maturity, we maintain the interests of our youth to a certain degree. So just kind of remembering how interesting this was to me when I was younger it is enough to kind of rekindle that interest. Anyways, talking about the movie itself, like I said before, the primary value of this movie is that it's based off of the transcripts. And the Aaron Sorkin movie plays very fast and loose with the transcripts. And it's interesting because past week or so on YouTube, I've been watching a lot of people reviewing Aaron Sorkin's movie. And it's evident that for a number of people, this Aaron Sorkin movie they didn't know anything about the trial beforehand. Then they watched Aaron Sorkin's movie, and they seem to be taking Aaron Sorkin's version as the definitive version. And for anyone who might be watching this video who that represents, I really encourage you to watch this movie, the 1987 movie, to counterbalance that. Because you'll see when you watch the movie, there's a number of things that Aaron Sorkin represented that actually weren't the way it went down. And again, I'll link to a video down below. This is a classic case of a movie that's going to self-select its audience. Meaning, if you're not interested at all in the history of protest or in the trial of the Chicago 8 or the radical movements or anything like that, this movie is going to bore you to tears. I'm interested in it, and I even had a hard time kind of sitting through the whole thing. I'll get to that in a minute. But if you are interested in this, then you probably don't need me to sell it to you too much. Just the idea of there's this movie existing that's a dramatization of the Courtroom Transcripts will probably be a big enough selling point on its own. And if it's not, don't watch this movie, because that's all it is, really. But for those of us who are interested in these kind of things, it's quite fascinating. Now, I'm going to make a little bit of a qualifying remark here that I believe this is based off of the courtroom transcripts to the best of my knowledge. I've done a little bit of searching online. It seems to be acknowledged online that this is based off the transcripts. I have actually read portions of the trial transcripts. You can actually get them in a book form. I think my library when I was in college had it was part of like a great trial series published by some sort of university press or something, but it was a complete trial of the Chicago 8 transcript, because the court reporter is kind of typing everything that everyone says down as they're talking, like they do in trials. And I never read that from cover to cover, but when I was procrastinating from my homework and I was in the library, I would actually flip through and read sections of it. And also large portions of this transcript are posted online. I'm not sure if anyone posted the whole thing from beginning to end online yet. Well, probably, huh? It's probably online somewhere. And you can read portions of it online. And I have, and the portions that I have read seem to line up with this movie very closely. But I do mention as a qualifying statement that I have not yet actually sat down with this movie and with a copy of the transcript in front of me and kind of followed it exactly to make sure how much of it is accurate. So I present that as a qualifying remark that I can't say with 100% certainty that I'm sure this is all accurate, but to the best of my knowledge, it seems to be accurate. The parts of the transcript I'm familiar with seem to be reproduced faithfully on this movie. The sources I've seen on the internet indicate that this is based off of the trial transcripts. And certainly when you watch the movie, you definitely get the feeling that it's based off of trial transcripts, because a screenwriter would definitely have been tempted to make a lot of this dialogue smoother. And obviously that's what Aaron Sorkin has done in his movie, among other things. So you can see at some points the actors seem to be stumbling over dialogue that doesn't feel entirely natural to them, because I think it's coming directly from the transcript, and they've imported large chunks of it, awkwardness and all. It is edited, because I think that's true of any film version of this trial, is there's just way too much to put in there. There was way too many people called onto the stand. The trial went on for months. Whenever you're trying to condense this into 2 hours, you have to cut out stuff. So there are whole people's testimony that gets cut out. Even some people who are called to the stand, only a portion of their testimony is presented. The summation speeches at the end by the defendants only kind of include key parts of it. So there is a lot of editing going on, but I believe that the parts that they do say are verbatim. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something. This is the problem with doing these things unscripted. Yeah, large portions of it edited out. Anyways, I forget where I was going to go with that, but I'll just kind of go in a different direction here. So if you're a history geek like me, and if you're interested in kind of seeing dramatized what was actually said, I mean, I guess if you want to really know what was actually said, then you have to go through and read the transcript. And the transcript is publicly available, so that's totally doable. I could never be bothered to read the transcript from beginning to end. I like to see the dramatization of it. And so if that's you, then this is fascinating. It's interesting, and again, this is going to be a comparison to the Sorkin movie. It's interesting that what actually happened in the trial transcript was much more interesting than Sorkin's rendition of it, at least in a scene-for-scene rendition. Now, there are lots of examples of this. The American flag scuffle on the when they put the American flag on the defense table, the reading out of the names of the people who were killed, Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin coming in wearing the judge's robes. I think right on down the line, every incident that's dramatized in Aaron Sorkin's movie is actually much more interesting when you see the actual trial transcripts. It's a criticism I'll get to when I review Aaron Sorkin's movie separately, is that he seems to have, in a number of cases when the reality was actually more interesting, he attempts to fictionalize it, and in fictionalizing it, he loses the interest. But that being said, I think scene for scene, one thing actually I should mention, the Bobby Seale incident. The Bobby Seale incident is actually much more interesting in this movie than it is in Aaron Sorkin's, because Aaron Sorkin's fictionalization of it does actually not match the drama of what really happened. And you can see this quite clearly if you watch this movie, that the back and forth between Bobby Seale and Judge Julius Hoffman, and just the continued escalation of that was actually much more interesting in the actual trial transcripts than Aaron Sorkin's rendition of that. I can't forget to mention that, because that is like the key thing, and I think that seems to be what sticks in the mind of people who watch either movie, because that's a key drama in the courtroom. All that being said, though, I do have to credit Aaron Sorkin with this. He has much more of a sense of the flow of a story and the momentum of character arcs, and how you can stretch that out over a 2-hour movie. Because when you watch Aaron Sorkin's movie, you are never bored. He makes a number of bad decisions, I'll get to that in a separate review. But you're never bored when you're watching it. The momentum of the movie really carries you through. That is not true of this movie, the 1987 HBO one. And I think that's because it's based off of the trial transcripts. So each individual scene is fascinating by itself. But when you sit down and watch the whole thing for 2 hours, and you're watching 2 hours of a dramatization of the trial transcripts, and each scene is essentially the same, you know, like the witness, the defense, the prosecution, the cross-examination, some sort of outburst from the defense table, and it really does begin to feel repetitive over the course of the movie. And I think, to give Aaron Sorkin some credit, this is what clearly he saw, that all these kind of outbursts and dramas had to be massaged into some sort of story with identifiable character arcs. Now, I think for those of us who are actually interested in the actual history, it's fascinating to watch something based off of the transcripts, but it does come with the caveat that by the end of it, I was starting to get a little bit restless. Certainly, even by the end of the trial part of it, I was starting to feel like, okay, this is a bit boring. And if actually rewatching it now, I was actually reminded of my experience watching it the first time back in 2000, where I had woken up early to see it. I was really excited. And I found the first hour absolutely fascinating. And then I remember kind of feeling a little bit like this was dragging on during the second hour and wanting to watch the whole thing because this was an area I was interested in, but also kind of squirming in my seat a little bit. That was back in the days when you watched stuff off of TV and you were a slave to the TV schedule. When you watch it off of YouTube, of course, if you find yourself getting a little bit antsy and feel like something is just dragging on a little bit, you are perfectly free to pause it, go outside for a walk, you know, go get something to eat, pour another cup of coffee, and then come back and see it again. And that is what I found myself doing when I was rewatching this movie. I mean, a classic example of this is at the end. So there are two stages of sentencing. There was one stage of sentencing where the judge was sentencing them for all the contempt charges. And then there another stage of sentencing where the judge was sentencing them for the actual charges of the trial. So you go through and each defendant is allowed to come up and give a speech before they get sentenced. And so they all come up and they give a speech about how, you know, this whole trial is a sham and you're being unfair to us and blah, 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 all the stuff you'd expect them to say. And then Judge Hoffman gives them their sentence. No, actually, sorry, in the movie version, you don't see him giving the sentence. They show that, they show that in like subtitles. You know, Rennie Davis sentenced to 14 months or something like that. As a side note, when I was rewatching this movie, I was surprised to see that like Rennie Davis got much more contempt charges than Abby Hoffman or Jerry Rubin did. I don't remember the number exactly off of my top of my head, but that was something that and David Dillinger as well got much more contempt charges. Because, you know, everyone talks about Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin changing this trial into the circus, but it looks like the people who really got under the judge's skin the most were apparently David Dillinger and Rennie Davis and some of these other people. That was a little bit interesting. But anyways, you go through all that, and then they actually have the sentencing portion for the actual charges that were brought against them, and then they all get up and give their speeches again. And again, this is all based off of the court transcripts. So like this is the actual history. This is what they actually said. So it's interesting in that respect. But in terms of like you're sitting on the couch, you're sitting there for 2 hours, you have a certain limited amount of attention span. This doesn't... A Hollywood screenwriter would definitely have been tempted to condense these, and Aaron Sorkin certainly does. And Aaron Sorkin condenses it a lot, and also changes everything. It's that classic trade-off with authenticity versus maybe what lends itself to the best drama. And I firmly believe that we need both. I've got nothing wrong with Aaron Sorkin dramatizing this. I can definitely see the temptation. But I think watch them both. Even though I think to watch the conspiracy of the Chicago 8 trial all in one sitting does get your attention span a little bit at the end, and it's not like a classic 3-act Hollywood play where there's rising momentum and then a climax and stuff like that. And you know, there's a temptation to kind of scoff at that type of screenwriting. But I think when you watch something that's not structured in that way, like a docudrama based off the court transcripts, you can see how your attention span is starting to wane during the second hour of it. Okay, that said, I want to reemphasize a point which I made earlier, is that scene for scene, this is all fascinating. Even though this is very low production values in terms of like the sets and the special effects and the quality of the film, the actors really do a great job. In the 1987 one, the guy they have doing Bobby Seale, who I don't even know what his name is, he is just really doing a very good job with this dialogue. I mean, it's dramatic dialogue to begin with, but he's really doing a very good job of dramatizing it. The other nice thing about this, the other interesting thing about this 1987 version is that all of the original participants were still alive at the time, which was not true 10 years later. You know, by 1997, Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman were dead. And certainly now in 2020, David Dillinger and Tom Hayden are also dead. I think William Kunstler as well. I mean, you couldn't do that nowadays, but you could do it in 1987, and they did. So all of the Chicago 8, you see it dramatized on the screen, and then like a little bubble square will pop up with like Tom Hayden's face in it, the real Tom Hayden. And he'll like give his commentary on what you just saw dramatized. I saw somebody criticize this on IMDb. I was doing a little bit of internet research just now, and they said it's so incredibly cheesy the way they do this. And it is. It is. And the production values are not great, the way that kind of bubble pops up. But it's interesting. I mean, I think with a movie like this, you have to consider it more educational than entertainment. And if you're interested in the actual history, of course, you'll find the education fascinating. There's a bit of awkwardness, and this awkwardness is kind of true with any dramatization of this trial, is there's way too much stuff that you have to include, and there's the whole backstory before the trial, right? There's a story of what actually happened in August of 1968 and the whole riots in front of the convention and stuff like that, and how that all developed. And that's like a whole movie within its own right. And then to incorporate that story within the story of the trial. And they do this here by intercutting with archival footage from time to time. And it's a little bit awkward, but I think this movie makes the right decision to focus mainly on the trial and just have a few kind of seconds of flashback to the archival footage of what actually happened in Chicago in 1968. I mean, really, if you want to know what happened in Chicago in 1968, you're going to have to go elsewhere than this movie. And I think that's the right decision, because other dramatizations of this I've seen, like the Chicago 10, where they try and include both the story of the protests and the trial, and I think there's just too much to include. You can't do that. So I think it makes the right decision to focus only on the trial. What happened to Bobby Seale in that trial is dramatized here very effectively, I think. And it's very interesting to watch, and it's clear when you're watching this that there's probably a bit of overreaction going on both sides. That's a subjective statement. Obviously, people can disagree with that. But my impression rewatching it is that Bobby Seale was being difficult. He was antagonizing the judge to some degree. But that being said, the reaction of the judge to that, the overreaction of the judge to that was much more than was called for. And I think that's a fairly uncontroversial opinion. Kind of everyone who was there said that the judge could have handled this in a much different way. And so the end result of that, where Bobby Seale was gagged, and then he had to be taken out of the courtroom and then gagged again, and the whole thing